to break all the records he's broken is something special. For us as part of this team to be involved with 79 of them is amazing. Why did the team not call the drivers in earlier for slicks in Q3? Well, it's actually really tricky in those situations to know what we should do. The strategists are looking at the delta times, they're trying to work out whether we're at a crossover between the intermediates and the slicks yet. We're listening to the driver information, we're looking at the weather forecast, we're trying to take in all that information and decide what we should do. When you look at what happened in Q3, we were right on the borderline and it was a really tricky call. And actually the problem for us is we're actually on the wrong bit of the track at the wrong bit of time. So others were able to make that decision, come in and get 2 clear laps on the slicks. For us, by the time we made the decision, we only ended up with the 1 lap. And the consequences of that were clear. It was clear that in hindsight, what we needed was a prep lap to get the best out of the tyres for the fast lap that was needed. Why did Lewis lose so many positions at the start of the race? Well, if you actually look at it, he was on the dirty side of the grid. And given that, he actually made a really good start. And he was making his way through the field effectively, up until the point where Norris moved across, blocking Lewis's path. Norris, we think, was also derating, so actually Lewis's closing speed was really high, partly because of the tow he had and partly because Norris was derating. And as a consequence of that, Lewis had to make a decision. Does he try and fight for that inside line, or does he brake and make sure he's not involved in a first corner incident? So you've got to bear in mind, in Lewis's mind, his main protagonist in the championship is right at the back of the grid. And as a consequence, Lewis has to make a decision in that split second about what's the right thing to do. And the right thing for Lewis to do was to make sure that he didn't get tangled up in a first corner incident. Was the strategy always to go long with Lewis in the first stint? I think when you've got a quick car, and we knew we had a quick car from Friday's running, what you really want to do is to be in clean air. You know, when you're tucked up behind another car, you can't exploit the pace of the car. So what you're trying to do with your strategy in that situation is to maximise your time running in clean air. And that meant ideally going long with Lewis on the basis we were hoping our competitors would be fighting for position and they would pit earlier than we did. That would allow us to go long in clean air. It would also mean that when we came out after our pit stop, we'd also have a chunk of clean air. So that was always going to be our strategy. Why couldn't Valtteri fight his way through the pack like he did in Monza? Well, first of all, Valtteri had a fantastic drive in Monza. It was amazing what he was able to achieve. This race was different though. It was harder. And the reason it was harder is because what we were seeing with DRS trains. So what I mean by that is one car at the front with a number of cars behind, all within that 1 second delta that allows them all to have DRS. As a consequence of that, even though Valtteri's got more pace, the car in front also has that same advantage of DRS and it makes it much more difficult to overtake. And we saw that up and down the grid with people stuck in those positions, unable to get past because of those trains. On top of that, Valtteri was also struggling with an amount of understeer in the car. And because of that, he was struggling in Sector 3 primarily. What that leads to is that leads to a position where it's very difficult to get close to the car in front. And as a consequence of that, once you get onto the straight, you don't get the full benefit of the tow because you're just too far behind. And by the time you're really sort of catching up, you're already too close to the end of the straight to make that pass. The timing for Lewis's switch to intermediates was perfect. What were the processes that fed into that? Well, first of all, thank you for the positive comment. I think the reality in these situations is really difficult for the strategists to get right. So let's just talk a bit about Valtteri first. With Valtteri, we were outside of the points, and that gave us some options to play with. It allowed us to take some risks with Valtteri that maybe we couldn't have done with Lewis. As a consequence, we were already thinking about the weather and thinking about if there's a chance to switch to the intermediates, do we go early? So that was probably an easier call. With Lewis, we knew we were in second in the race, and we knew that if we got that wrong, we could fall right back down the field. So it's a much more challenging call. But the strategists are looking at lots of different bits of information. They're looking at the timing from each sector and trying to work out, are we at that transition between slicks and intermediates? They're getting information fed into them about the weather from the weather radar. And they're also listening to the driver feedbacks and the driver telling them how they feel the circuit is like. So that position, we've got a half dry circuit, a half wet circuit. It was a really difficult call to make, probably one of the most difficult things for the strategists to do. And the bit that really made the difference for us was the weather radar. And the person that was looking at the weather radar made a very clear call. What they said is they expected more rain before the end of the race, that the track was actually going to get wetter. And that's what tipped the balance to the decision of pitting for the intermediates. How did Valtteri make it back up to P5? I guess just feeding on that last answer, really, it's a similar story. We made the right strategy. We got Valtteri onto the intermediates at the right time. So prior to the rain coming, I think we were in 12th position. We were outside of the points. And when that rain came down, that gave us an opportunity. Between the strategists and Valtteri, they made exactly the right call. We fitted the intermediates, and we were able to pass by other cars who were struggling on the track when they came into pit for the intermediates themselves. And as a result, Valtteri ended up back in P5, which is a great result for the team. How was my heart rate during the last 6 laps? Well, interestingly enough, I've actually worn a heart rate monitor to a couple of races in the RSR. And I know, looking at that my heart rate rises for qualifying. I know it rises at the beginning of the race and falls away, and it comes up a little bit for each of the pit stops. I suspect my heart rate was reasonably strong during that last 6 laps. But what you've got to bear in mind is I'm sat surrounded by a team of people that all know what they're doing. They're all very calm and experienced, and they're sitting there making the right calls. So what you might think is a sort of frenzied amount of activity in the race support room, that isn't really how it happens. People calmly do their job, focus on their bits of what they need to do and feed that information in. And it wasn't until after the race finished that the joyous sort of sound came up within the race support room, and fantastic, given we haven't won for a few races, that sort of opportunity to celebrate together. With Lewis achieving the amazing result of 100 wins, how does it feel to be a part of 79 of those? Lewis has been an unbelievable driver. To break all the records he's broken is something special. For us as part of this team to be involved with 79 of them is amazing. But in actual fact, what you've got to bear in mind is some of us have been with Lewis for a lot more than that. I personally have seen 88 of his wins because I spent a chunk of my early career at McLaren. For some of my colleagues at HPP who work on the power unit, they've seen all 100 of Lewis's wins. So it's an amazing achievement for those guys as well. But coming back to Lewis, that is unbelievable achievement. It's probably not going to get surpassed for a long, long time, if it ever is. So massive congratulations to him. I think I can do something better than that. Yeah. What? Thank you for all of your questions and all of your support. One of my colleagues will be back here in 2 weeks' time to answer more of your questions from the Turkish Grand Prix.